part of the question was, do we even have rights of any treatment or vaccines that would come if they are imposed on us? I mean, would the poor people even have access to treatment in this case? And the fourth reflection was hunger and starvation. Should the extension of lockdown happen, how is this going to be productive? I mean, he thinks that a lot of people would die of hunger and starvation than even the coronavirus. Just like you said, do you just want to throw light on this aspect of the lockdown and its impacts of the people that would not have...
Let me break down the question and isolate three issues that really jump out of that very broad question. Number one is, how do we deal with this? And we, as faithful citizens, are already obeying our governments. We are saying that whether our governments are in the direction of using excessive force or going overboard, fighting, as I've said at one forum, responding to a mosquito bite with a hammer, we are beginning to accept that. But we are saying, let us ask ourselves the question, COVID-19, like all other viruses, will not be totally eliminated.
Yes.
What will happen, and I speak not as an expert, what will happen is that it will plateau out. Just in the same way that malaria is still with us, just in the same way that influenza is still with us, just in the same way that cholera is still with us. But we are saying that there are certain fundamental things that we must deal with. And these are basic hygiene. We must wash our hands. These are issues of the environment in which we live and operate, whether it's in the office space, whether it's in the domestic space, whether it's in the schools and colleges and health facilities. We must now improve because we have been found stark naked. If you look at most African countries, they don't even have ICU beds. We don't have ventilators. Even the so-called large economies in Africa don't have more than 200 ICU beds. This is the situation in which we find ourselves. Should we lament now? Yes, we should lament, but use the lamentation as an avenue towards preparation. So that going forward, we must remember that if we operate regionally, and this is why I think it is very critical. Look at the East African region, and I'm going to give this region. This region puts together Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan. We know that South Sudan, up till the 31st day of March, which is only 3 days ago, there was no case of corona. They had only tested 18. If they were to engage in robust testing, perhaps there would be people with symptoms. But if we were to coordinate regionally, perhaps we would help those who have the capacity to do so. Burundi also found herself in a similar situation. If we go down south, we know that the Zimbabwean economy has been battered by sanctions. We know that almost 70 to 80% of the Zimbabweans live out of employment and therefore live below $1 a day. If we are to go to West Africa, to countries such as Niger, Central African Republic, and we go to countries such as Mali and Mauritania, the situation is dire, the economic situation first. So my own view is the African Development Bank and other Pan-African institutions must now be in the lead. When we develop a vaccine, how do we test them? Because we live in a continent where when the Federal Drug Administration Authority in the United States has tested a vaccine, then Africa assumes that that is fine. If the Europeans have tested a vaccine, then we think it is fine. When the Chinese have tested one, we think it is fine. Why can't we, during this period, begin to see the political class empowering the scientist class with a view to ensuring that we move into the direction of discovery? Our universities should be empowered. Our institutions, So I've spoken about that, and I'm saying our standardization should be homegrown. That does not mean and cannot mean that we shall not collaborate with others. But as Ali Mazrui once said, we cannot be a continent which is in the business of consuming what it does not produce and consuming what it does not produce. And secondly, on the economic front, we've got to look at our feeble economies. I've already talked about some of the countries that rely on tourism. Tourism is dead for the next 2 years, even more. You look at the aviation sector, all the airlines and most African airlines really were suffering except the Ethiopian airline. And if you look at, you go beyond that sector, you go into the flower sector, you go into mining sector. All these sectors are affected in a very fundamental way. And that brings me to the question of lockdown.
Yes.
Perhaps the word lockdown is the word that is confusing us because it's also a foreign word. Lockdown, as we understand it and as we have seen it deployed in Wuhan, in China, and as being deployed in Uganda and in South Africa, means, number one, that you will be confined to your house, you will remain there, and those who are confining you to your house assume, among other things, that you'll have stocked on food, that you have refrigerator, that you have a microwave, and that you have all these provisions, and you'll be able to ride.
Is dit jouw levensplan?